tonight. I said, do you believe that the power of the Lord can heal you right now?
Pastor John could make the blind see and the lame walk, but he was about to find out that every miracle has a price, and his was 30 women in a single night. What is the price of greatness? And why did 30 beautiful women leave this powerful man of God fighting for his life in a nameless hotel? Stick around, because you need to see the secret ritual that happens behind the closed doors of the world's richest pastors. It's not what you think. The sun was just beginning to rise over the small town, painting the clouds with soft orange light. The streets were waking up slowly, traders pulling up rusty shutters, women balancing baskets of fruit on their heads, and the smell of freshly fried akara floating through the air. In the middle of the busy market, Pastor John stood with his small wooden pulpit, a worn Bible open in front of him. His voice was clear and full of warmth. My brothers and sisters, the Lord is still doing miracles today. Don't give up. Don't lose hope. People stopped to listen. A tired-looking Okada rider, a tomato seller with red-stained hands, a mother carrying a baby on her back. Pastor John didn't have big speakers or a camera crew, but his words carried a power that drew people in. That morning, a woman in the crowd stepped forward, holding her child. The boy's left leg was twisted, and he struggled to stand. Pastor John prayed, his eyes closed, one hand gently resting on the boy's head. His voice was soft but firm. Lord, you made this child. Make him whole again. When the boy took a small step without falling, the crowd gasped. The mother began to cry and thank God. Pastor John smiled, lifted his hands, and led them in a short song of praise. But that wasn't the only miracle that day. As the crowd grew, an old trader named Uncle Ben limped over. He sold fish, but his back hurt so much he could barely lift his buckets. Pastor, pray for me, he said, his face twisted in pain. Pastor John nodded kindly. God sees your hard work, Uncle. Let's ask him for help. He placed his hands on the man's shoulders and prayed. Father, touch this man's back. Take away the pain so he can keep providing for his family. Uncle Ben straightened up slowly, his eyes wide. It's gone. The pain is gone. He bent down and picked up a bucket with ease. The people cheered, and Pastor John thanked God quietly. Moments like this filled him with joy. He wasn't a rich man, his shirt was faded, and his shoes had been repaired more than once, but his heart was full. After the service, Pastor John packed his Bible into a worn leather bag and began the short walk home. His house was a small two-room apartment at the edge of the town. Grace, his wife, greeted him at the door with a warm smile. Welcome, my dear, she said, taking the bag from him. How was the market today? Inside, their children, David and Joy, were sitting on the floor, drawing on old sheets of paper. David jumped up and hugged his father tightly. Daddy, did God heal someone today? He asked eagerly. Pastor John laughed softly. Yes, my son. God healed a little boy's leg and Uncle Ben's back pain. It was wonderful. They sat down for lunch. Gary with a little soup Grace had made from vegetables she got at a discount from a kind market woman. The children laughed and told stories while eating, and Grace and John exchanged small smiles. After lunch, Pastor John played with the kids. He lifted Joy onto his shoulders, making her giggle as he pretended to be a horse. David tugged at his shirt. Daddy, why don't we have a big car like some other pastors? The ones in the city have shiny ones. John paused, his smile fading a bit. We have what God gives us, David. A big car isn't what makes us happy. It's our love for each other and for God. Grace watched from the kitchen, her eyes soft. You're right, John. We're blessed. She came over and hugged him. But sometimes I worry about the bills. You work so hard. John held her hand. God will provide, Grace. He always does. It wasn't an easy life, but it was a happy one. They didn't have much money, but they had peace, and Pastor John believed that was worth more than anything else. Still, there were moments that made him wonder. One afternoon in the market, as he was packing up his things, he overheard two women talking. That Pastor John is powerful, one of them said. But look at him, still trekking everywhere. If he was like Pastor Emmanuel, By now he would be driving a jeep. The other woman laughed. Maybe he just doesn't know how to connect with the right people. Pastor John kept his face calm, but the words stayed in his mind. It wasn't just the market gossip. From time to time, he noticed men in shiny suits standing at the edge of the crowd when he preached. They didn't clap or shout, "Amen," like everyone else. They just watched. Their eyes followed his every move, and when he caught their gaze, they would give small, knowing smiles before turning away. Something about those smiles made him uncomfortable. One day, as he finished praying for Uncle Ben, he saw them again, the tall one with a beard and the shorter one with sunglasses. They whispered to each other, their voices low but just loud enough for John to catch a few words. "He's ready, big reward." His heart raced a little. What did they mean? It was a Thursday evening when it happened. The market was quieter than usual, and the sun was dipping low in the sky. Pastor John had just finished a short message and was praying for a woman when two men approached him. They were dressed in sharp suits, shoes polished until they shone. One was tall with a neatly trimmed beard. The other was shorter, wearing dark sunglasses even though the sun was fading. "Pastor John," the tall one said with a wide smile, "we've been watching you for some time. You are a gifted man of God." "Thank you, sir," John replied, still feeling that strange tightness in his chest. "You have a calling," the man continued. "But, my brother, you will never reach the world by preaching to a few market women. You need a bigger platform." The man with sunglasses nodded. "We can help you grow your ministry. We have connections, influence, and the resources to take you to the next level." Pastor John looked from one man to the other. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes, and up close, he noticed how their hands fidgeted slightly, like they were hiding something. I'm not sure I understand," he said slowly. The tall man chuckled. "You will. Let's talk another time. We'll be in touch." They both shook his hand firmly before walking away, their expensive cologne lingering in the air. That night, Pastor John lay awake beside Grace, staring at the ceiling. The fan creaked softly as it turned. He thought about his children sleeping peacefully in the next room. He thought about Grace's quiet strength, the way she always made the best of what they had. He thought about the joy he saw in people's eyes when God answered their prayers, like the boy's leg or Uncle Ben's back. But he also thought about those men, their polished shoes, their confident words, their strange, unreadable smiles, and the whisper he overheard about a big reward. Part of him felt curious. What if they could help him reach more people? What if they could give him the money to take care of his family better? Another part of him felt a cold knot in his stomach. Something about them wasn't right. It wasn't just what they said, it was the way they said it, like they were offering more than just help. His heart beat faster as he remembered their fidgeting hands and cold eyes. Grace stirred beside him. "You're not sleeping," she murmured. "I'm fine," he said quickly, forcing a smile she couldn't see. But as the night stretched on, he knew he wasn't fine. In his heart, he felt a quiet warning, the same feeling he got when dark clouds rolled over the town before a heavy storm. And for the first time in years, Pastor John felt nervous. Pastor John's heart felt heavy, like a stone in his chest, ever since the rich pastors spoke to him in the market. Their words echoed in his mind as he tried to pray or read his Bible. "You will never reach the world by preaching to a few market women. We can help you grow your ministry." He saw David's face, asking why they didn't have a big car like other pastors. He thought of Grace, worrying about bills even though she smiled through it. What if those men could help him give his family a better life? But deep down, a quiet voice whispered that something was wrong, very wrong. One Sunday afternoon, as he sat on the worn couch after his market sermon, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. John's hands felt sweaty as he answered. "Pastor John," a warm voice said. "It's Emmanuel, from the market. We'd like you to join us for a small meeting tomorrow evening. No pressure. Just come and hear what we have to say. We'll send a car." John's throat tightened. He glanced at Grace, who was washing dishes in the kitchen, humming a hymn. The quiet warning in his spirit grew louder, but he pushed it down. "All right," he said softly. After he hung up, he sat still for a long time. David ran in, holding a drawing of a car. "Daddy, look. Maybe one day we'll have one like this." John forced a smile, but his heart ached. The next evening, a shiny black SUV pulled up outside their small apartment. Neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering as John stepped inside. The leather seats were soft, and the air was cold from the air conditioning. The driver, a silent man in a dark suit, didn't look at him. They drove deep into the city, passing tall buildings and bright billboards with smiling pastors promising miracles. John's stomach twisted as they stopped at a huge house with high walls and heavy iron gates that clanged shut behind them. Inside, the house smelled of sweet perfume and polished wood. Gold-framed paintings hung on the walls, and a long glass table gleamed under a chandelier. 5 men in sharp suits sat around it, including Pastor Emmanuel and the man with sunglasses. Their smiles were wide but didn't reach their eyes. "Welcome, Brother John," Emmanuel said, his voice smooth like honey. "These are great men of God who have done mighty works. You have a gift, but it needs a push to shine." They talked for over an hour, their words big and exciting. They spoke of kingdom influence, financial grace, and reaching the world. They promised John a big church, money for his family, and power to draw crowds. "God wants you to prosper," Emmanuel said, leaning forward. "Why stay small when you can be great?" John listened quietly, his hands folded tightly in his lap. He pictured Grace and the kids eating Gary every day, and part of him wanted to believe them. But the cold knot in his stomach grew tighter. Their smiles felt like masks, and the room seemed to close in around him. After the meeting, they led John to a smaller room with dim lights and one big chair in the center. The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. Emmanuel's voice turned serious. "Brother John, the work of God is not for the weak. To grow, you must pay a price. Every great pastor you see today has walked this path." John's heart raced. "What price?" he asked, his voice shaking. Emmanuel's smile didn't move. "You'll see in time. But know this, once you step forward, there's no turning back." John's mind screamed to leave. He thought of Grace's hymn, David's drawing, Joy's giggle. I need to think about it," he said, standing up. The man with sunglasses stepped in front of the door, his face hard. "Please sit down, Brother John," he said, his voice like ice. He grabbed John's arm, his grip too tight, making John wince. "You don't walk away from this." John's legs felt weak as he sat back down. His mouth was dry. "Okay," he whispered, the word feeling like a stone dropping into a deep well. The men smiled again, but now their smiles looked sharp, like knives. They took his phone, saying it was for security. They told him he wouldn't go home for a while because separation is part of the process. The heavy gates outside clanged in his mind, like a door locking him in. That night, they brought John to a large hall. Candles flickered on long tables, casting strange shadows on the walls. The air smelled of wax and something sour, like old fruit. Strange symbols were drawn in red and black, curling like snakes. Men and women in long black robes moved silently, their faces hidden in the shadows. Their footsteps echoed softly, like whispers in the dark. John's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. This wasn't a church. This wasn't God's house. Emmanuel stepped forward, his voice low. "Welcome to the circle, Brother John. We are not just pastors. We are a family of power. We use ancient secrets to control the spiritual and physical world. That's how we prosper." John's knees shook. This is not from God," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Emmanuel's eyes narrowed. "You're already here. If you try to leave, there will be consequences, for you and for your family." He leaned closer, his breath cold on John's face. "Grace wouldn't want that, would she?" John's heart stopped at the mention of his wife. He pictured David and Joy, asleep in their small room. He wanted to run, but his feet felt stuck to the floor. It was too late. He was trapped. The next evening, they took John to another room. Soft music played, but it didn't calm him. The room was bright, with red curtains and sweet-smelling flowers. 10 women sat in a circle, dressed in tight, shiny clothes. Their beauty was strange, too perfect, like dolls. Their eyes stared at John, unblinking, and his skin prickled, like he was standing near something dangerous. The man with sunglasses spoke, his voice calm but sharp. Your final step into the circle is simple. You must sleep with 30 special women in one day. Each one will give you a piece of our power. John's mouth went dry. 30. In one day. His voice cracked. Yes, the man said, his smile thin. Do this, and you'll never lack money or influence again. Fail, and... He let the words hang in the air, heavy like a storm cloud. John's hands shook as he looked at the women. Their eyes seemed to glow faintly, and a cold chill ran down his spine. He thought of Grace's warm smile, David's car drawing, Joy's giggle. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. But the man's words echoed, consequences for your family. John nodded slowly, his heart sinking. A quiet voice inside screamed that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The first woman stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the floor, like a slow drumbeat. Her dress shimmered, and her eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "John," she whispered, her voice soft but sharp, like it cut through the air. When she touched his arm, a hot pain shot through his chest, like fire under his skin. He gasped, but she only smiled and pushed him gently to the bed. When they were done, John's legs felt wobbly, like he'd been running for hours. He leaned against the bed, trying to catch his breath. The robed man clapped once. Next. The second woman glided forward, her movements too smooth, like she wasn't quite human. Her perfume was heavy, making John's head spin. As she leaned close, she whispered his name again, "John," and a cold chill ran down his spine. When she was done, his arms felt heavy, like they were tied to stones. Sweat dripped into his eyes, stinging. By the third woman, his heart was racing, and a dull ache started in his chest. He closed his eyes, picturing Grace humming a hymn in their small kitchen. "I'm sorry," he whispered to himself. The fourth woman came, her eyes darker than the others, like deep wells. The candles flickered as she passed, and the room seemed to grow colder. John's hands shook as he tried to stand straight. Her touch felt like ice, and when she left, he stumbled, catching himself on the bed. The robed man's smile was thin. "Keep going, Brother John. You're strong." But John didn't feel strong. His breath came in short gasps, and his vision blurred at the edges. He looked at the women waiting, their faces all the same, beautiful, cold, wrong. He thought of David asking, "Daddy, why don't we have a big car?" His heart ached. This wasn't what he wanted. By the fifth woman, the pain in his chest was sharp, like a knife twisting. He tried to pray, "Lord, help me," but his voice was weak. The woman's eyes seemed to glow brighter, and she whispered, "You chose this." John's knees buckled, but he caught himself, his hands shaking. At the sixth woman, John couldn't take it anymore. His whole body felt like it was sinking into the floor. The room spun, and the candle's light blurred into streaks. "I can't," he said, his voice hoarse. He stood, stumbling toward the door. "I want to stop." The robed man moved fast, blocking the door. His sunglasses glinted in the candlelight. "You can't stop," he said, his voice low and cold. He grabbed John's arm, his grip like iron. "Think of your family. Do you want them hurt?" John's heart froze. He pictured Grace's face, Joy's giggle. He sank back onto the bed, his eyes burning with tears. "Okay," he whispered, but inside, he felt like he was breaking. The seventh woman came, her perfume so strong it made him dizzy. Her eyes didn't blink, and her voice was a hiss. "John, you're ours now," she said as she pushed him to the bed. The pain in his chest grew worse, and his legs shook so badly he could barely stand. The eighth woman approached, her heels tapping like a clock counting down. Her smile was sharp, like a blade, and her eyes glowed like fireflies in the dark. John tried to stand, but his body wouldn't listen. His heart pounded so hard it hurt, and his vision went dark at the edges. "No more," he mumbled, but the words slurred. As she touched him, a sharp pain shot through his whole body, like lightning. The room tilted, and John fell to the floor, his breath gone. He heard the robed man shout, "Catch him!" but it sounded far away, like a voice underwater. The last thing he saw was the woman's face, her smile growing wider, her eyes glowing brighter. Then everything went black. When John's eyes opened, bright white light stabbed at them. He was lying in a hospital bed, a machine beeping steadily beside him. The air smelled of medicine and clean sheets, but his head felt heavy, like it was full of sand. His arms wouldn't move right, and his throat was too dry to speak. 2 nurses stood nearby, whispering. "He was dropped off at the hotel entrance," one said. "No ID, no name. The men who brought him ran off." "Who called the ambulance?" the other asked, frowning. "No one knows," the first said. "It's strange." John tried to sit up, but his body wouldn't listen. His chest ached, and the memory of the women's glowing eyes made his heart race again. 3 days later, the hospital door burst open. Grace ran in, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. David and Joy followed, clutching her hands, their small faces scared and confused. "John!" Grace cried, rushing to his side. She grabbed his hand, her fingers trembling. "Where have you been? We looked for you everywhere for 3 days. The market women said you left with some strange men." David climbed onto a chair, his eyes big. "Daddy, why are you sick? Did you get lost?" Joy hugged Grace's leg, her voice small. "Daddy, come home." John's heart broke. He tried to speak, to tell them he was sorry, but only a weak croak came out. Tears ran down his face as he looked at Grace's worried eyes, David's questions, Joy's fear. Grace wiped her tears and held his hand tighter. "The doctor says you're very weak. You need to rest." "But John, what happened? Please tell me." John closed his eyes. The women's cold voices, the robed man's threats, the flickering candles, they all swirled in his mind. He wanted to warn Grace, to tell her about the circle, but his voice wouldn't work. Deep inside, a quiet voice told him this was only the start of his pain. The mistake he made was bigger than he could ever fix. The hospital room was cold, the air heavy with the smell of medicine and bleach. A machine beeped beside Pastor John's bed, its sound uneven, like a heart struggling to beat. The fluorescent lights flickered sometimes, casting dim shadows on the walls. John lay still, his face pale, his eyes closed. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a quiet fight. Grace sat by his side, her hands folded tightly around a worn Bible. Her eyes were red from crying, and her lips moved in silent prayer. She hadn't slept properly in days. David and Joy came after school, their small footsteps soft on the tiled floor. They climbed onto chairs, watching their father with big, scared eyes. "Daddy, please wake up," Joy whispered, holding a crumpled drawing of their family. "I drew this for you." David's voice trembled. "Why is Daddy so sick? He was strong before." He clutched Grace's arm, looking for answers she didn't have. Grace forced a smile, but her hands shook. "God is with him," she said softly, but her heart felt heavy, like a stone sinking in water. For 2 weeks, John didn't wake. The doctors were confused. "His body is weak," one said, frowning at his charts. "His heart rate is low, but we don't know why he won't open his eyes." Grace nodded, her fingers tracing the Bible's pages. At night, she dreamed of John standing in a dark room, his face pale, reaching for her but unable to speak. She'd wake with tears, a cold fear gripping her heart. Something was wrong, more than sickness. Every morning, she leaned close to John's ear. "We're here, John. Me, David, Joy. Come back to us. Please." Her voice broke, but she kept praying, hoping for a sign. The nurses moved quietly, their faces worried. "He's not getting better," one whispered in the hallway. "It's like something's holding him down." On the 15th day, as the sun rose and painted the room orange, John's eyelids fluttered. Grace gasped, dropping her Bible. "John," she said, her voice trembling with hope. His lips moved, but no sound came at first. Then, a voice came, low, raspy, not like his own. It sounded like it came from far away, echoing in the quiet room. "The circle, 30 ladies." Grace froze. The words felt heavy, like a cold wind blowing through the room. Her heart raced. "John, what? What are you saying?" She grabbed his hand, but it was limp. He mumbled again, his eyes still closed. "The circle, 30 ladies." His voice was strange, like someone else was speaking through him. A nurse adjusting the machine jumped, her eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to another nurse outside. "It's not normal." They glanced at John, their faces pale, and hurried away. Grace's hands shook as she held his. "John, talk to me. Please." But he went silent, his chest rising slowly again. Over the next 3 days, the mumbling came and went. Sometimes John's eyes opened, staring at the ceiling, but they didn't see Grace or the kids. His lips would move, always the same words, "The circle, 30 ladies." Each time, his voice sounded stranger, deeper, colder, like it wasn't his. One night, Grace woke to the sound of his mumbling. The room was dark, the only light from the flickering machine. John's face was sweaty, his eyes half open, glowing faintly in the shadows. "The circle," he rasped, his voice echoing like it came from a cave. Grace's heart pounded. She turned on the lamp, but it flickered, making the shadows dance. "John, stop," she said, tears falling. "Tell me what's wrong." David woke up, curled on a chair. "Mama, why's Daddy talking like that?" he asked, his voice small. Joy hugged her doll, crying softly. "I'm scared." The nurses stopped coming unless they had to. One whispered in the hallway, "It's like he's cursed. I don't like being in there alone." Grace overheard and felt a chill. She didn't believe in curses, but something evil had touched her husband. John never got stronger. His hands trembled when Grace fed him soup, and his legs couldn't hold him up. His eyes were dull, like the light inside him was fading. He tried to speak sometimes, reaching for Grace's hand, but only weak sounds came out. Tears rolled down his cheeks when he saw David and Joy, as if he wanted to say he was sorry. Grace stayed by his side, praying harder each day. "Lord, save him," she whispered. But deep down, she felt he was slipping away. 2 months after his collapse, on a quiet evening, the machine's beeping slowed. Grace was dozing in her chair when it turned into a long, flat tone. She jerked up. "John," she said, shaking him. His face was still, his chest no longer moving. David and Joy ran in, crying. "Daddy!" David shouted, grabbing his hand. Grace pulled them close, tears streaming down her face. The nurses rushed in, but it was too late. At John's funeral, the small church was packed with market people who remembered his prayers and kindness. The air smelled of flowers, and the wooden pews creaked under the crowd's weight. Grace stood by the coffin, holding David and Joy's hands, her face pale but strong. When she spoke, her voice was steady but full of pain. "My husband was a good man. He loved God and helped people. But he listened to men who promised money and power. He left God for riches, and it took everything: his health, his peace, his life. Don't make that mistake." The crowd was quiet. Some cried, remembering John's market sermons. Others bowed their heads, thinking of their own choices. As Grace led her children out, she still heard John's strange raspy voice in her mind. "The circle, 30 ladies." A mystery that would haunt her forever, a warning of what happens when you chase money over faith. When you leave God for money, you lose everything. Did this story move or entertain you? Then show some love, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the Story Cave. More stories like this are waiting for you.